I hadn't planned on arriving early that day. My last client meeting wrapped up ahead of schedule, and I thought it would be a nice surprise for my daughter if I picked her up early from my parents' house. Just a quiet, ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I parked in front of the colonial-style home I grew up in, the one they almost lost, before I stepped in, and made my way to the front door, expecting to find 6-year-old Sadie coloring or watching cartoons. Instead, the first thing I heard was my father's voice, sharp, booming, unmistakable. "Wash the dishes right, you useless girl." The words hit me like cold water to the chest. I froze just inside the foyer. I hadn't been called that in years, but I remembered exactly how it felt. Walter Jensen. My father had always spoken with authority. He was a high school football coach before he retired, and he never quite learned how to switch off the field voice. To most people, he was strict but respectable. To me, growing up, he was the man who could tear me down in a single sentence. I stepped slowly toward the kitchen. What I saw made my stomach turn. Sadie. My daughter, my little girl, was standing on a wobbly step stool, her small frame barely reaching the edge of the sink. Her pink t-shirt was soaked, and her hands were red from hot water. She was scrubbing a large pot that looked far too heavy for her. Her shoulders shook, and she blinked back tears, trying to stay composed. My mother, Evelyn, stood nearby by the refrigerator. She didn't say a word, just crossed her arms and glanced toward the window like none of it was her concern. At the kitchen table, my older sister Melissa sat scrolling through her phone, indifferent, while her daughters Chloe and Riley, 12 and 10, giggled behind a tablet. "She's so slow," Chloe whispered, not so quietly. "Can't even do dishes right." Riley snorted. "That's 'cause her dad didn't want her. Mom says that's why he left." Sadie's lip trembled, but she kept scrubbing. She didn't look up. She didn't say a word. My feet stayed rooted to the floor, but inside me, something shifted. A pressure I didn't know I was still carrying started to break apart. I saw myself again, age 6, trying so hard to be useful, to be enough, and I realized something I had never wanted to face. I had let history start repeating itself, and I wasn't going to let it go any further. I didn't speak, not yet. I just watched her, Sadie, my 6-year-old daughter, trying so hard to stay small, to stay quiet, as if that would protect her. I'd taught her to be polite, to be patient, to be kind, but I never taught her how to defend herself from the people I should have protected her from. The air in the kitchen felt too familiar, too much like the past. When I was Sadie's age, that same kitchen was my battleground. My sister Melissa, 2 years older, was the golden one, the pretty one, the one whose drawings were hung on the fridge and whose scraped knees were kissed with affection. I was smart, sure, but not in the way that counted in our house, not in the way that earned smiles. I remember my 10th birthday. I got a used paperback, the spine already cracked, while Melissa got a new bike just 2 weeks earlier because she'd been helpful. I'd spent the whole day convincing myself the gift didn't matter, that maybe love wasn't always loud or visible. But the message was clear. Even then, Melissa shined. I stood in her shadow. Back then, my father Walter rarely raised his hand, but he didn't need to. His voice could strip the skin off your confidence. His favorite phrase when I messed up, "You're better than this, act like it," which in hindsight wasn't encouragement. It was dismissal dressed as pressure. My mother Evelyn wasn't cruel, not outright. She just disappeared in moments that counted. She'd busy herself with dishes while I cried, or adjust the curtains when Dad shouted. She believed that staying silent was staying neutral. But silence, I've learned, is a decision. And now, here I was, standing in the same house, hearing the same words come out of the same man's mouth. Only this time, it wasn't directed at me. It was directed at my child. The realization hit me like a punch. I had brought Sadie here, to the very place I once vowed never to return to emotionally. I let myself believe that because my parents offered to help with childcare, they had changed. That maybe age had softened them. But it hadn't. They hadn't changed. They had simply found someone smaller to aim their disappointment at. Sadie hadn't always been this quiet. Before the divorce, she was bright and curious, always asking questions, always singing songs she made up on the spot. But after Brent left after he packed his things and moved in with his 24-year-old assistant, she changed. We both did. Brent Jensen, my ex-husband, was charming and driven. We met at a financial conference in Chicago and married less than a year later. For a while, we believed we were building a life. Then Sadie came along and suddenly Brent discovered parenthood didn't fit his timeline. When Sadie turned 3, he said the words that would rearrange everything. I made a mistake. I'm not cut out for this. The divorce was quick, maybe too quick. He wanted out. I wanted peace. We signed papers, split assets, and agreed on a custody arrangement he rarely honored. It was just the two of us after that, me and Sadie, figuring it out as we went. I kept working full-time as a financial consultant for a firm in Boston, juggling client meetings and daycare pickups, late-night budgeting, and early morning tantrums. And when my parents offered to watch Sadie 2 afternoons a week so I could stay late at the office, I said yes. I didn't want to not at first, but I told myself it was just temporary, that they were older now, that maybe they'd be different with Sadie than they were with me. Besides, I couldn't afford a full-time sitter. Childcare in the city was brutal, and after helping my parents avoid foreclosure 4 years ago, I didn't have much wiggle room. They had fallen behind on their mortgage 3 months late when they finally admitted it. My father blamed a bad investment. My mother blamed the economy. I didn't blame anyone. I just set up the automatic payments, $2,500 every month. It was supposed to be short-term, but months became years and the payments never stopped. I never told Melissa. I never told anyone. In some twisted way, I think I still believed that maybe, just maybe, if I kept giving enough, they'd finally see me. Maybe they'd finally love my daughter the way they claimed to love me. Sadie's hand slipped. The pot clanged against the sink loud enough to make everyone flinch. Walter. My father slammed his palm down on the counter. The sound echoed through the kitchen. For God's sake, he barked. Can't you do anything right? This is why your cousins are always ahead of you. Sadie jumped, her shoulders hunched forward in that way. I remembered the posture of a child trying to disappear. She didn't cry out. She didn't move. She just stood there staring at the water running down the inside of the pot as if willing it to end. My mother finally spoke, but not to comfort Sadie. Walter, she sighed, the neighbors will hear. Not don't yell at her. Not stop talking to her like that. Just the neighbors will hear. Melissa didn't even look up from her phone. Her daughters were still giggling behind the tablet, barely paying attention or pretending not to. Chloe nudged Riley. Mom says Aunt Natalie spoils her. That's why she's so helpless. My heart knocked against my ribs. Then I heard Sadie's voice barely audible. Grandpa, it's really heavy. Walter didn't soften. Life's heavy, he snapped. Your cousins could handle dishes when they were your age, but you're just like your mother, always full of excuses. My hands clenched, my breath caught. That sentence, that tone, I had heard it 100 times, maybe more, but never aimed at someone I loved more than anything. Evelyn moved to take the pot from Sadie. She's obviously not capable, she muttered. Just let me do it. No, my father cut in. She needs to learn. Responsibility doesn't come from babying a child. Elaine thinks money solves everything. He stopped short, realizing he'd said my name instead of Sadie's. I stepped into the doorway. It's Natalie, I said evenly. And if you're going to lecture my daughter about responsibility, maybe don't do it standing in the kitchen of the house I've been paying for. Every head turned. My father stiffened. My mother gasped. Melissa finally glanced up. Sadie looked over and blinked, like she wasn't sure I was real. Then she dropped the sponge and ran to me, wrapping her wet arms around my legs. She was trembling. I rested one hand gently on her head. What exactly is going on here? I asked, my voice low, and measured the way you speak when you're past the point of yelling. My father squared his shoulders. We're teaching her to help. She needs to pull her weight. She's 6, I said. She weighs 38 pounds. She needs discipline, my mother added. I looked around the room at Melissa, at her daughters still lounging untouched by chores, and said, Then why is Sadie the only one who ever seems to be learning it? Silence. That's when I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a bad day. It was a pattern. And it ended now. My father took a step toward me, not threatening exactly, but towering like he used to when I was a child and couldn't hold his gaze. "You should be grateful," he said. "We watch your kid for free while you chase your career." Grateful. I almost laughed. "For calling her useless," I said quietly. "For forcing her to do chores she's physically not strong enough for. For letting my niece call her stupid while you stood there and said nothing." "We never called her stupid," my mother snapped. "But you stood by while Chloe did." "And you said nothing." "That's the same thing." Melissa rolled her eyes. "Are we really doing this?" It was one comment. "Sadie needs to toughen up." I turned to Sadie. "Honey, has Grandpa talked to you like this before?" She hesitated, looked toward my father, then nodded slow, certain. "Every time I come here," she whispered, "he makes me clean things. The bathrooms, the patio. When I spill something, he yells. He says I'm not as good as Chloe or Riley." My father opened his mouth, but I cut him off. And Grandma Sadie looked down. "She told me not to eat too many cookies 'cause I might get fat like Daddy was." There it was, the invisible bruise, the one that doesn't fade. I took a breath. "Get your daughters," I said to Melissa. "Take them home. Now." Melissa stood muttering something about overreacting, but I didn't respond. I didn't need her approval. Once the door closed behind them, I turned back to my parents. "You want to talk about gratitude," I said. "Let's talk numbers. 4 years ago, when you were behind on your mortgage, I stepped in. I've paid $2,500 a month every month for this house, this roof you're standing under. That's over $100,000. They looked stunned. I had never said it out loud before. I had kept that ledger quiet, thinking maybe if I gave enough they'd change. But they hadn't, and now they'd crossed a line they didn't even seem to see. I looked at Sadie, then back at them. This was the last time she steps foot in this house, and as of today, I added voice steady, the bank will be hearing from me too. That night, I opened my laptop, logged into my banking portal, and stared at the line of recurring payments, all of them marked mortgage, Jensen residence. 4 years of quiet generosity. 4 years of trying to buy the love I never got for free. I clicked cancel, confirmed, closed the tab. I slept better than I expected. By morning, there were 6 missed calls from my parents, 2 voicemails, a text from my mother that read, "Payment declined. Call us. This must be a mistake." It wasn't. Melissa messaged me later that afternoon. "What the hell did you do? Mom's in tears. Dad's threatening to sue. You've gone too far." I stared at the screen, then typed back slowly. "If your daughters ever mock mine again, you'll be cut off too, not financially, but from our lives." She didn't respond. 2 days later, the bank called. My father, Walter Jensen, had tried to access my account, claiming he had authorization. They flagged it as suspicious activity. I changed every password, froze my credit, called my advisor. I wasn't surprised. Not really. That week, Sadie began to open up. Little by little, through whispers at bedtime or coloring together in the kitchen, the pieces came out. Every Tuesday and Thursday, while I worked late, she'd been made to scrub floors, clean bathrooms, pull weeds in the backyard. No cartoons, no games, just responsibility. Meanwhile, Chloe and Riley were given ice cream and let off the hook. Sadie was told she wasn't as smart, that she had to earn love by being good, that her cousins didn't talk back. And the worst part, Grandpa said, "You're too busy for little things," that if I told you, you'd be mad at me. That one sank deepest. They hadn't just mistreated her. They had groomed her to stay silent, just like they once did to me. That night, I sat at the edge of her bed as she fell asleep and made a promise, not out loud, not for show, but in the quiet language mothers know. It ends with me. A week after I canceled the mortgage payments, my parents received a formal notice of foreclosure. I expected it. What I didn't expect was the mass email they sent to our entire extended family, a 3-paragraph manifesto claiming I'd abandoned them in their time of need over a minor misunderstanding with Sadie. The backlash came swiftly. Aunt Carol, my mother's older sister, replied all I was at Thanksgiving 2 years ago. I saw the way Walter spoke to Natalie and the way Chloe and Riley mocked Sadie while no one said a word. Maybe it's time someone held them accountable. Others chimed in too. Cousins, old neighbors, Quiet people with long memories. And then came the message that stopped me cold. It was from Uncle Dean, my father's brother, someone I barely knew. Natalie, you're not crazy. Your parents have always expected someone to clean up after their mess. Your grandfather left them a sizable inheritance. It was gone in 5 years. They never saved, never planned. And when Melissa married Greg, who couldn't support them, they turned to you. I stared at the screen. So it wasn't just about me. It never had been. They were never going to stop asking, never going to stop taking, not because they needed help, but because they felt entitled to it. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and pulled out the file folder where I kept all my financial documents. I ran the math again. 4 years of mortgage payments, utilities, groceries. I gifted them during holidays. Over $120,000. Quietly, consistently, without fanfare. And for what? So Sadie could be told she was fat. So she could be scrubbed down to fit inside their rigid mold, the same one that broke me decades earlier. I closed the file and slid it back into the drawer. Then I opened a new document on my laptop and typed the name of a therapist, Dr. Michelle Avery, recommended by Sadie's pediatrician. If we were going to break this cycle, we'd need help. Not just Sadie, me too. Dr. Michelle Avery had warm eyes and a calm presence, the kind that didn't ask you to hurry. On our first session, I barely spoke for 10 minutes before I broke down crying, not out of sadness exactly, but out of release. Like something too heavy had finally slid off my shoulders. She listened. Then she said simply, "You've spent most of your life trying to earn love from people who only valued you when you were useful." I nodded. The truth felt like a bruise someone finally acknowledged. And now she added, "They're teaching your daughter that same lesson. But here's the difference you noticed. You acted. That's where the cycle breaks." 2 days later, my parents showed up at my apartment. No warning. I saw them through the peephole, my mother clutching a manila folder, my father's mouth tight with frustration. I spoke through the door. "I'm not opening it. If you want to talk, it'll be in a therapist's office." "Elaine, this is childish," my mother snapped. "We're your parents. We need to resolve this. My name is Natalie." But I didn't correct her. That part no longer mattered. "You raised me to believe family meant obligation," I replied, calm but firm. "But I'm teaching Sadie something different." There was a pause. Then my father's voice low but biting. "You'll regret this, Natalie. We're not your enemies." "No," I said quietly. "But you're not safe right now either." They left. I stood there a long while before sitting down at the kitchen table. Sadie was at her art class and the apartment felt unusually still. That evening, I received a message from Aunt Carol. "Your mom called trying to get me to talk sense into you. I told her sense was finally what you were using." It made me smile. Not because it solved anything, but because it reminded me I wasn't alone in this. At our next therapy session, Dr. Avery asked, "What would accountability look like for your parents? Not just an apology, real change." "I don't know yet," I said. "But I know what it doesn't look like: unannounced visits, guilt-tripping, and demanding money." "Then that's your starting line," she said gently. Hold it. And for the first time in years, I believed I could. A week later, we met at Dr. Avery's office. Neutral territory, neutral lighting, neutral expectations. I arrived first. Then the door opened, and there they were, my parents. Walter Jensen with his stiff posture and thinning patience. Margaret Jensen in a cardigan she wore whenever she wanted to appear softer than she felt. Dr. Avery welcomed them calmly, then laid out the ground rules. Everyone gets to speak, no interruptions. This isn't a courtroom. It's a table for truth. My father exhaled sharply. "I'm here because Natalie demanded it. Let's just say what needs to be said." So I did. I brought Sadie into your home because I thought maybe things would be different, that she'd get the grandparents I never had. But what she got was judgment, silence, and shame. My mother interjected, "That's not fair. You're twisting." Dr. Avery held up a hand. "Margaret, you'll have time." "Let Natalie finish," I continued. "Sadie told me about the chores, the name-calling, the favoritism, how you stood by while Chloe and Riley humiliated her." My father's jaw tightened. We were teaching her responsibility. She's too soft. Responsibility, I echoed. By calling her useless, by making her scrub your floors while her cousins watched cartoons. He didn't respond. My mother sighed. We weren't perfect, but you're making us out to be monsters. We raised 2 daughters. You raised 1 golden child and 1 emotional accountant, I said, voice steady. You gave Melissa room to breathe. I got the pressure to perform, and now the bill to pay. Silence stretched. Then Dr. Avery asked Walter Margaret, can you see how your behavior might have harmed Sadie? Not just in the moment, but long term. My father muttered, I didn't mean to scare her. I saw myself in her, the way she froze. It stopped me. It was the first crack I'd seen in his armor. My mother swallowed hard. I should have stopped him. I should have told Chloe to watch her mouth. I didn't, and I'm sorry. The words didn't solve everything. But they landed. Dr. Avery looked at me. I'm not asking for perfection, I said quietly. I'm asking for a future that doesn't cost my daughter her self-worth. And for once, they both nodded. Not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. It was a beginning. In the weeks that followed, there were no grand gestures, no handwritten letters, no surprise visits, just space. And silence, the respectful kind. Dr. Avery helped us set boundaries for reintroduction. 1 short visit, public setting, no alone time with Sadie. At first, my parents bristled, but they complied. Our first meeting was at the botanical gardens near the edge of town. Sadie wore a yellow dress she picked herself. I watched her clutch her drawing pad like armor. My parents arrived on time. No gifts, no sweets, just themselves. To my surprise, Dad bent slightly to her eye level and asked, Do you want to show me your drawings? Sadie hesitated, then slowly flipped open her sketchbook. This one's a tulip. The shading's not done yet. My father nodded. I like how you started with the petals first. That's how I used to draw them too. He didn't correct her, didn't compare. Just noticed, kindly. It wasn't redemption, but it was a moment. 2 months later, we were able to meet in our apartment again. I stayed in the room, always nearby, always listening. Mom had taken to bringing Sadie a small book each visit, no candy, no bribes, just something they could read together. Sometimes Sadie said no, and Margaret accepted it. The rules were being learned. I wasn't naive. I knew this wasn't a Hollywood ending. My parents weren't different people, but they were making different choices. The house they almost lost had finally been sold. They'd moved into a modest condo near the library. Dad picked up part-time hours giving walking history tours downtown. Apparently, he'd always wanted to do that. Mom joined a community reading group. For the first time in years, they were living on their own terms. And I was, too. Sadie had started sleeping through the night again. No more whimpers. No more clinging after school. Her teacher said she was raising her hand more not to be right, but just to try. One evening, as I tucked her in, she whispered, Grandpa didn't get mad when I dropped my juice today. He just got a towel. I kissed her forehead. That's how it should be, baby. She smiled. Maybe people really can learn. I looked at her, my daughter, my reason. Sometimes I said it just takes someone brave enough to break the old rules, and this time I didn't mean her. I meant me. Sometimes we don't get the family we need until we become the parent we wish we had. It took me over 3 decades to understand that love isn't measured by sacrifice, but by safety. And healing isn't about changing the people who hurt us. It's about protecting the ones who come after. If you're listening and you're tired of carrying the weight, let this be your permission. You don't have to keep paying for someone else's peace. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away with grace.